In this first What the Elle video, I'm going to discuss with you a very incredible historical mystery that hasn't been resolved, but that still intrigues so many people. It's the loss of the Roanoke colony. What happened to probably the first colony of English settlers in North America? In this video, we're going to discuss how it happened. I mean, like, what happened before the loss of the colony, the first settlers. We're going to discuss the main characters. We're going to discuss what happened, what we know. And then we're going to discuss the different theories of how we explain how this colony vanished. The story of Roanoke started with a man called John White. We don't have portraits of him, but he was an avid painter himself. His destination was the island of Roanoke on the eastern coast of North America. There, White and his men established a colony. He then returned to England, and 3 years later, he made the decision to return to Roanoke and to resume his position as governor of the colony. Upon his return, and to his greatest surprise, White realized that everyone, the 100 men and women, had disappeared, had completely vanished from the small island. How? Why did they vanish? That is what we're going to try to discuss and to reveal in this What the Elle video. But actually the story is much more complex, and it starts in 1584. 2 ships sailed across the Atlantic in the search for the establishment of a new colony. Elizabeth I, was ruler at the time, was determined to establish her own colonies in the New World. She really wanted to rival with the Spanish Empire and with Philip II of Spain. For that, she had obviously her seafarers, her privateers, her pirates, Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake. Walter Raleigh was the one who was given all this help and all this money, this finance, this funding, to go and establish an English colony in the New World. When the English arrived in 1584, they met Native Americans, and the relations were cordial enough. The relation was so cordial that at first the English really thought they could establish a colony in the New World. The Native Americans were ready to help the English settlers. First expedition in 1584 was just to see where they could land. So they decided to stay in the outer banks of that part of North America and to be behind in that new small island that's called the Roanoke Island. It helped preventing them from being seen by the Spanish pirates or privateers, their Spanish enemies, and it gave them kind of a sort of protection. Yet they were not sure how much, they could really stay. They needed more supplies to be able to stay. Some Englishmen returned to England with more provisions. Walter Raleigh was given a powers by Elizabeth to establish a permanent colony on Roanoke Island. In April 1585, 600 men left for America, but they suffered a big disappointment. Hit by a violent storm and by different complications, they lost most of their provisions once they arrived. They massively relied on Native Americans' hospitality, which at first they did. Only 100 men were left out of the 600 men. So it was a total disaster for Sir Walter Raleigh. The support that was given by the Native Americans started to be a burden for the natives. Furthermore, more and more suspicions was growing between the natives and the English settlers. Suspicions and fear grew among the tribes, who saw the English as a bad omen. The first battle between the natives and the English settlers happened after the death and the murder of Wingina, a tribe leader. The suspicions between the two parties only kept growing, and the tension was almost unbearable. After that battle, the English decided to leave Roanoke Island. Only 3 men were left behind because they could not be found. The settlement of 1585 on Roanoke Island was a total failure. One man was, however, determined to return and to make it a success: John White. He was a painter, as I mentioned before, and also a true adventurer. He had studied how Sir Walter Raleigh did things, and he had become a close friend to Sir Walter Raleigh. It is quite unclear how this man managed to enter these expeditions, but he did. He convinced Raleigh to attempt another venture, which would include women and children. He even took with him his pregnant daughter and a family, Elle. 3 ships left for North America in spring 1587. The goal, however, was to avoid Roanoke and find somewhere else to settle. They wanted to establish their colony on Chesapeake Bay. They believed it was a more appropriate place for the English settlers. However, the Portuguese navigator Fernandez, who was advising the English, and who was highly experienced and highly respected by the men on board, refused to go to Chesapeake Bay and left the crew and the people on Roanoke. White was not in a place where he could really dispute Fernandez's expertise, and in the end followed his instructions. The natives were not happy with the return of the English and made some attacks on the colonists. In 1594, when there was the first contact between the natives and the English colonists, 2 tribal chiefs, Winchelsea and Manteo, were brought back to England. Winchelsea was from Roanoke and Manteo was from Croatoan. Winchelsea resented the English, and when he came back to Roanoke in 1585, he didn't want anything to do with them. He really resented the people and thought that the English were quite evil. Manteo, on the other hand, was really intrigued by the English customs and language and turned out to be a good ally. He learned the language, became an interpreter, and worked for the English. He was basically a mediator between the native, the Croatoan, and the English. Roanoke was not a safe place for an English settlement. Fernandez and White decided to return to England to take more men and supplies to ensure the survival of the colony. White left his daughter behind. As he left them behind, he never realized that he would never see them again. After a long voyage, White returned to a country at war with Spain, and Elizabeth is going to forbid any ships to leave English ports. It means that White is going to be stuck in England for 3 long years, always wondering what's happening to the colonists and his daughter on Roanoke Island. In many ways, they knew that Roanoke Island was not a safe place, but they didn't put strategies or, things in place to make sure that the survival of the colonists would last for more than a year. So being stuck in England at war with Spain, it was the worst thing that could have happened to White. In 1590, White was determined to return to his daughter and to his island, and upon his return, his greatest fear had become a reality. The colony and the colonists had vanished. When he arrived, he saw smoke of fire on the island, but he couldn't tell what happened. When White and his men arrived on the island, they were searching for the colonists. They could not find any corpses or bones, which gave them hope. What they found is 2 clues. On one tree there was C-R-O, on the other was Croatoan. White was convinced that the colonists, if they couldn't find the bodies, that the colonists had probably fled to Croatoan. He probably believed that Manteo had helped rescue the colonists from an attack. And when we look at White's letters, he said that there was like a kind of an agreement between the settlers and White to make him understand what happened when he would come back. And so if they had been taken by force, they had to put a cross above. So he believed, because there was no cross, that they were not taken by force, and that's why he believed that the Croatoans had saved or rescued or helped the colonists. There was still hope for John White to be reunited with his daughter, Elle. White was convinced that the colonists were in Croatoan, and he was really determined to go. However, twist of fate again, his anchor snapped and he could not go to Croatoan Island. It was just too dangerous. He was forced and he was convinced by Fernandez to go back to England once more. So is it? The colonists vanished and went to Croatoan? Can we just rely on these engravings to understand what happened on Roanoke Island? John White would never be reunited with his daughter. What happened to the colonists is still a mystery today. Obviously, we have this idea that they might have been on Croatoan, but there are other possibilities. There was an agreement where it was agreed that the colonists would go 50 miles into the mainland, and 20 years or so later, 1607, Jamestown was established onto the mainland because it was just more secure for the English to be more on the mainland than on a small island in the outer banks of that part of North America. The settlement of Jamestown is also another story, but there was the chief Powhatan who captured John Smith, that we know because of the story of Pocahontas, and I'll probably make a video on that incredible woman, not the Disney movie, and so we will discuss that. But here Powhatan captured John Smith and discussed the fact that he had seen white people like him before, but there is no evidence of this. There are other reports that state that people were with blonde hair or had blue eyes, and so there's a reason to believe that maybe these colonists had found tribes and had mixed up with the Native Americans. Years later, we do have another lead that emerged. John Lawson made contact with the Hatteras, the Croatians' neighbors. They said to Lawson that their ancestors had been white and came from probably the first English settlers, so the colonists from Roanoke Island. Hatteras were in Lawson's mind, without a doubt, the descendants of the colonists that were lost on Roanoke Island. In the 1930s, stones were found, but we realized that they were just oaks. One of them could have been true. It's about the letter of Elle to her father, where she engraved things on a stone. I mean, for me, it is quite difficult to believe. What truly happened to the colonists of Roanoke remains a mystery today. And though I believe that probably something disastrous happened, maybe it was an attack from Winchelsea, maybe it was an attack from other tribes, maybe they did flee with the Croatoans, maybe Roanoke was so unhospitable that they left on their own accord. What I know is that probably some survived and were probably integrated into the tribes. But we would really know what happened to Elle. I really doubt it. And I think that is why it's such an interesting story. It shows you that there are some incredible historical mysteries that we still have to investigate today. I hope you really enjoyed this first What the Elle in a History video about this historical mystery. I will make more videos like this about medical mysteries and other type of mysteries, and I really hope that you will enjoy these videos as much as I do. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you like that video, and if you would like to see my other content, you could maybe join Elle History Club if you would like to have access to other type of content that I provide. Thank you so much again for watching. Thank you for being here. I'm so forever grateful, and see you in the next video. Bye!